You were never meant to hear this. And if you keep listening, something inside you will change. Forever. In 2018, beneath the rotting floorboards of Salem's oldest meeting house, a book was found. Not a Bible, not a diary, a ledger, a private record, bound in black leather and stitched with red wax. Inside were 437 names, every one of them marked for erasure, every one of them dead. Officially, the Salem witch trials ended with 19 executions. That's what the textbooks still say. But the truth was never written for the public. It was buried one page at a time by the Blackwell family. Judge Ezekiel Blackwell, Reverend Nathaniel Blackwell, Sheriff Josiah Blackwell, 3 brothers, 3 positions of ultimate authority in colonial Salem. They didn't just accuse witches, they created them. Each accusation wasn't random, it was calculated. Property, wealth, land. The so-called devil's servants were always people who stood in the Blackwell's way. The missing, the condemned, the forgotten, and every one of them profitable. But this isn't just about 1692. This is about a blueprint, a hidden mechanism of control buried inside the founding structures of American power. What the Blackwells perfected in Salem didn't die with them. It evolved, spread, and if you know where to look, you'll see it everywhere. In courthouses, churches, government files, and philanthropic foundations. The darkness has a lineage, and its fingerprints are still warm. This isn't conspiracy. This is blood-soaked history scrubbed clean by those who inherited the spoils. 437 victims, all stripped of their rights, their land, and eventually their lives. Silenced not by witches' curses, but by ink, rope, and power. You're not watching this by accident. This is your first step into the unspoken war between those who rule history and those buried beneath it. And by the time we reach Section 33, you will never see your country the same way again. The descent begins now. History remembers the hysteria. Screaming girls, crude trials, hanging trees. But hysteria was the mask, crafted carefully by men who understood fear as a tool. What truly happened in Salem was not religious fanaticism. It was a harvest. Picture it. The year is 1692. A harsh winter bleeds into spring. Food stores are low. Illness spreads like smoke through wooden homes. Salem is starving, physically and spiritually. And the Blackwells, 3 powerful brothers, move like shadows behind the panic, feeding it with whispers and sermons. Judge Ezekiel, the eldest, with ink-stained fingers and a voice colder than the gallows he commands. Reverend Nathaniel, gaunt and wild-eyed, preaching fire into the marrow of terrified congregants. And Sheriff Josiah, brute enforcer, his carved walking stick rumored to break bones as easily as bread. Together they controlled court, church, and law. No one held power outside their reach, and soon no one dared try. But understand this, their plan wasn't improvised. The ledger proves it. Victims weren't chosen for piety or sin. They were selected for what they owned. Mills, river access, farmland. Every accusation of witchcraft aligned perfectly with strategic acquisition. And when landowners refused to sell, their reputations and lives were destroyed. This was not spiritual warfare. It was a hostile takeover. And it worked. In less than a year, the Blackwells tripled their holdings. They rewrote property lines like they rewrote scripture, mercilessly. And those who questioned them, they vanished. One entry in the ledger stands out. A name scratched violently into the parchment. Mercy Blackwell. Not a victim, not an accuser, a daughter, the judge's own blood. She began recording the truth in secret, copying pages, gathering evidence, risking everything, because Mercy saw it all. The meetings, the torture, the lies cloaked in sermons and signatures. She was the ghost in their machine, the one person who could expose them. But the question still lingers. Why was her name in the final entry? Mercy Blackwell. Family matter resolved. That phrase still chills the air in Salem today. No grave, no record, just silence. And if you're thinking this was just a family's greed gone mad, you're not listening close enough. This is about a pattern, a playbook passed down. Because the Blackwells weren't the first, and they damn sure weren't the last. Salem was never just a town. It was an experiment. an isolated community bound by faith, hierarchy, and fear, a perfect testing ground for psychological control. You see, the Puritans didn't just fear the devil, they feared each other. And fear is the most obedient weapon of all. The Blackwell brothers understood that better than anyone. Judge Ezekiel ruled the courtroom like a sovereign king. His trials were swift, his logic circular. You couldn't prove innocence because innocence wasn't the point. Guilt was the default. All it took was a trembling accusation and the echo of a sermon. He'd nod once, raise his hand, and that was it. Property seized, legacy erased. Reverend Nathaniel was worse, a master of psychological manipulation. Every Sunday, his voice cracked like thunder through the rafters of the meeting house. He didn't preach salvation. He preached surveillance. God sees everything. The devil dwells in silence. Doubt itself was heresy. And in a town starving for certainty, certainty became a drug, administered by him. Then there was Sheriff Josiah, a human gallows, brutality cloaked in duty. His walking stick, carved from the hanging tree itself, was rumored to be soaked in the blood of 28 men by 1692. Some said he smiled when bones snapped. But his most terrifying weapon wasn't pain, it was paperwork. Once your name appeared on his parchment, you were already dead. Now think about this. Why would 3 of the most powerful men in the colony need to do this? Why orchestrate mass executions under the guise of religion? Because fear consolidates power faster than war. Every hanging tightened their grip. Every stolen property expanded their reach. But it wasn't just about land. It was about control over belief, control over perception. They didn't just rewrite laws. They rewrote truth. And once people began to believe that questioning authority meant questioning God, the Blackwells had won. But something was happening beneath the surface. Mercy, quiet, observant, invisible, was documenting everything. Her private writings are the only reason we know what truly occurred. She copied names, described torture techniques, mapped land seizures. Her words are an indictment, proof that the trials were a smokescreen for a systematic purge. And then, she vanished, the day before Governor Phipps returned from Boston. The last entry in her journal was just 3 words. They know everything. So I'll ask you now, how deep are you willing to go? Because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. It begins with fire, a letter, charred at the edges, discovered in 1993 behind a false wall in an abandoned Salem carriage house once owned by the Blackwell estate. The ink was faded, but legible. A single sheet and signed, but unmistakably written by Mercy Blackwell. It reads, asterisk, I have seen men smile while burying truth. I have seen God's name used to drain a man's lifeblood onto pine floors. My father believes no one will ever find this. But if you are reading it, know this, they did not stop. They only changed the robes they wore. Asterisk. What does that mean? It means what happened in Salem wasn't just murder by law. It was the refinement of erasure, the surgical removal of obstacles, reputations, entire bloodlines, all behind the curtain of legitimacy. And that model, the Blackwell model, was exported, whispered through corridors of colonial power, adopted in southern plantations, even mirrored in early American institutions. The trials were never meant to end in Salem. They were a prototype, a template for controlling dissent and consolidating dominance, all while the public begged for it. Because here's the darkest truth no one wants to admit. People don't fear injustice. They fear chaos. And if the executioner wears a robe, quotes scripture, and signs in the name of order, they will cheer as their neighbors hang. That's what made the Blackwells untouchable. The trials gave them cover. The church gave them absolution. And the law gave them tools. But behind it all was a quiet, disciplined strategy. One that ensured no bodies would rise, no names would survive, and no one would trace the blood back to their family name. Except Mercy. Her writings show she uncovered more than corruption. She uncovered design. She discovered her uncles had studied similar trials across Europe. German witch hunts, English inquisitions, Dutch land disputes masked as moral cleansings. The brothers had researched how hysteria could serve power, how fear could become a currency, and they were ruthless in its investment. But here's where the story fractures. There's reason to believe Mercy Blackwell never died in Salem. In 1721, a woman using the alias MB arrived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, applying for work as a midwife. Her application included fluency in Latin, a rare trait. Her age matched, her description matched, and her handwriting nearly identical. She vanished again 5 years later. Some believe she started a hidden lineage. Others say she was silenced for good. But her words, her truth survived. And now they're in your ears. Still want to know how far this goes? Then keep falling. They called it the final acquisition phase. That's what Mercy overheard from behind the wall of Judge Ezekiel's study. It wasn't a trial. It wasn't purification. It was a business strategy, a term whispered like ritual inside the house of a man who passed death sentences before breakfast. By October 1692, the Blackwell brothers had gone too far. The land grabs had grown more aggressive, the accused more prominent, the executions more quiet. No longer hanged at public gallows but vanished, slipped into swamps, buried in night, labeled escaped, madness, suicide, flight, lies. But they'd miscalculated one thing: patterns. And patterns, when repeated, become trails. That's what Mercy followed. With trembling hands and a lantern burning low, she connected the dots her father hoped no one would ever see. All through that black ledger, one symbol kept reappearing. A crude circle, bisected with a single vertical slash. She found it beside every secretly executed prisoner. Always near the phrase, asterisk disposed, acquisition complete, asterisk. She didn't recognize it at first. But weeks later, she saw it again, carved faintly into the stone floor of her Uncle Nathaniel's study, partially obscured by a dusty rug. She lifted it in the night and found 9 such markings, arranged in a precise grid beneath the floorboards. These weren't just symbols. They were coordinates, markers of burial, a private graveyard of enemies, sanctified with silence. Let that sink in. The Reverend Nathaniel, spiritual guide of Salem, was conducting ritualized burials of the murdered, using coded symbols beneath a house of worship, a church converted into a mausoleum of secrets. And here's the part that twists the knife. Mercy wasn't the only one who noticed. A young constable named Elias Corbin, newly appointed by the governor's office, had begun his own quiet investigation. He'd grown suspicious after multiple prisoners escaped on nights with no footprints. He began watching the brothers, following their routes into the woods, recording times. He even mapped a stretch of marshland where a lantern light was seen bobbing after midnight, always after a trial, always when the Blackwells believed no one was watching. One night, he didn't return home. 3 days later, Sheriff Josiah claimed Elias had fled to Boston, but his name? Nowhere in the official travel logs. His horse? Found dead near the swamp. No one questioned it, except Mercy. She added his name to her copy of the ledger. 437 victims, we say today. But truthfully, that number was only what she could confirm. The real count may never be known, because the Blackwells didn't just bury bodies. They buried memory. There's a reason power fears memory, because when memory survives, lies rot. And in the case of the Blackwell dynasty, their empire wasn't just built on bones, it was built on forgetting, erasing names, burning pages, silencing those who remembered. But Mercy refused to forget, and that made her the most dangerous person in Salem. Her ledger, the one she copied in secret, was a ticking bomb. It held everything: names, locations, assets, methods. It exposed a system so efficient, so cold, it made the devil look sloppy. She had hidden it beneath the loose floorboard of her room, wrapped in wool, sealed in wax. And every night she added to it. Alone, cold, terrified, but relentless. And then, she disappeared. October 14th, 1692. No trial, no charge, no body. Her bed still warm, her shoes missing, her floorboard pried open, the ledger gone. In its place, a single page, written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. Asterisk, rebellious root removed. Order preserved. Asterisk. Who wrote it? No signature, no seal. But the handwriting bore similarities to a scribe employed by Ezekiel Blackwell, his assistant Thomas Weld, a man known to carry out special tasks for the judge. A man whose own wife was quietly buried 6 years earlier after falling ill in 1763, 70 years later. A young schoolmaster renovating an attic in Danvers, Massachusetts, formerly Salem Village, uncovered a bundle of wax-sealed pages. The handwriting matched no known citizen. The names? They matched landowners who had vanished in 1692. Every page bore the same circle and line symbol. Every page referenced acquisitions made by EB, NB, and JB. Experts dismissed it, called it folklore. Salem hysteria. One historian even claimed the ledger was a hoax created by abolitionists to smear colonial forefathers. Of course, they said that truth like this doesn't just destroy reputations, topples bloodlines. But we're not here to protect bloodlines. We're here to trace them, to expose what generations have buried under foundations, courts, and cathedrals. And if you've followed this far, you're not just watching a story. You're waking up inside one. They called themselves the Keepers. But they didn't keep justice. They didn't keep truth. They kept control. According to recovered fragments of the ledger, the Keepers were a private council of 5 men. 3 of them confirmed Blackwells, who met quarterly at a remote site known only as the Hollow. The location was never officially documented, only referenced in ciphered passages and one chilling note found in the margins of Mercy's copy. If you find the Hollow, do not speak its name. That land hears. Sound like superstition? That's what they want you to think. But here's what's real. In 1701, just 9 years after Mercy vanished, Governor Joseph Dudley approved a land charter transferring 1,100 acres of unsettled territory to a private colonial trust, under the stewardship of Judge E.B. and Associates. That land included a dense forested valley northwest of Danvers, unreachable by cart during winter, and with no existing settlements. On early maps, that valley was left blank. No trees, no rivers, no topography, just white space. Why? Because sometimes the absence of information is the loudest evidence of all. Over the next 50 years, reports of strange activity began to surface from travelers near the area. Smoke without fire, robed figures walking at dusk, children disappearing from edge settlements and never returning. Local tribes avoided the land entirely, calling it whisper ground, and every time someone tried to investigate, they vanished, or reappeared days later, babbling incoherently, unable to speak of what they saw. Some believe the Hollow became more than a burial site. They believe it was where the Keepers perfected their system, not just through land and law, but through something darker, something ritualized, something passed down not by decree, but by blood. And that brings us to the most disturbing document of all. A single letter, unearthed in 1874, locked in the cellar of a burned-down Quaker meeting house. The ink was crimson. The seal, a circle split by a vertical line. It read, "The Hollow breathes now. The fire purifies. The children see. They will not forget the name. Blackwell, *. The fire had destroyed everything, except the letter. The Hollow was real, and the Blackwells never left it." In 1812, a surgeon named Dr. Elias Bourne published a strange little pamphlet titled *, an inquiry into degeneration among the Essex lineages. * most dismissed it as pseudoscience, until he was found dead in a Boston boarding house, his eyes removed, his fingernails peeled back to the bone. His final written words? "They are not merely a family. They are a species of control. And they are still selecting." The pamphlet, which vanished for nearly a century before resurfacing in an estate auction in 1933, made a haunting claim. The Blackwells had been breeding loyalty. They married only into specific bloodlines, families with documented histories of obedience, ambition, or cruelty. In some cases, they even arranged reverse adoptions, taking children from poor families into benevolent custody, only for them to disappear from public record after their 13th birthday. Dr. Bourne claimed this was no accident. He said it was harvesting. He cited 10 names, 10 children, all removed from their birth registries between 1760 and 1809. And the strangest thing? Each of those names reappeared as adults listed decades later as property trustees, federal clerks, or judges, under entirely new surnames, all connected to the same land, the Hollow. Dr. Bourne even named one, G.R. Wainwright, a man who helped draft the 1790 Massachusetts Legal Suppression Act, a piece of legislation that conveniently sealed hundreds of local court documents from the colonial era, including trial records from the Salem courts. You see what's happening? The keepers weren't just hiding their past. They were rewriting the future. By 1830, the hollow was no longer marked on maps. Its borders were absorbed into a larger tract labeled Blackwell Agricultural Holdings. But no farming ever took place there. No shipments, no census data, just silence. And fences, miles of them. And here's what keeps historians up at night. In 1928, an aerial photo taken by a surveyor for a New England highway project captured something in the hollow. Something circular, massive, perfectly symmetrical, half buried beneath forest cover. When asked about it, a Blackwell Foundation spokesperson claimed it was an old mill site, but forestry experts disagreed. The terrain showed no signs of industrial disruption, only ritual architecture, stone, patterned, ancient, and that photo, confiscated 2 days later by federal agents. The surveyor, reassigned. His notes, burned in a controlled file room fire. Only the outline remains, hand-traced by a fellow cartographer who managed to copy it before it vanished. A circle, slashed vertically. You've seen it before. So had Mercy. So had Elias Corbin. So have we now again. They keep their symbols, because they believe symbols keep them. But truth? Truth doesn't obey bloodlines. It erupts. And now it's your turn to choose. Look away, or follow the trail deeper. It always begins with a school. That's the Blackwell signature. They don't invade with soldiers. They don't silence with swords. They educate. Because when you control what children believe, you control what a nation forgets. In 1854, a prestigious boys' academy was founded just 14 miles from the hollow. It was called New Vesper Academy for the Gifted and Noble, funded by a mysterious endowment from the Blackwell Trust. Its motto, "Let the child be shaped by order, that order may shape the world." At first glance, it looked like any elite prep school. Ivy-covered halls, strict uniforms, classical education. But former students described something else. No clocks in classrooms, no mirrors in dormitories, and one day each month students were taken underground. They called it the descent. No one spoke of what happened down there, not even decades later. The few who tried were quickly institutionalized or found dead by suicide, each leaving behind pages of paranoid scribbles, symbols, and fragments of a chant. Remember the hollow, remember the rule. The flesh forgets, the blood obeys. New Vesper's faculty were untouchable. Many were former clergy or ex-military. One was rumored to be a descendant of Ezekiel Blackwell himself, Headmaster Nathaniel A. Blackwell, who was never photographed and who never left the campus. He ruled for 46 years. Students were selected, not enrolled. Families were offered opportunity. And in many cases, those families were never heard from again. In 1883, the academy burned. Officially, lightning strike. But locals told another story. Of screams of thunder with no storm, of figures seen walking into the fire. No bodies were found. Only one thing remained. A sealed copper box recovered from the rubble by a firefighter who later vanished. But before he did, he showed its contents to his brother, a teacher who described it in his personal journal. Pages bound in skin, names written in alternating red and black, and in the center a circle with a line. Below it, a child's tooth. That journal is now locked in a private collection at Harvard. But we've seen the scans. We've traced the ink. The same handwriting appears in records from Blackwell land sales, in voter logs from 1776, and in a letter found in a hidden drawer at Mercy's childhood home. It never changes, because it's not a man's handwriting. It's the asterisk family's. They've passed it down like a relic, or a curse. And if the academy was their school, then we are all now their students. Unless we decide to unlearn what they taught. What if I told you the United States government once opened an official investigation into the Blackwell family, but the files were sealed before they were finished? It happened in 1919. The investigation was codenamed Operation Quiet Lamb. Why lamb? Because the cover story involved protection of religious freedoms. But buried deeper, hidden in footnotes and redacted memos, is the real story. A whistleblower from within the Department of the Interior had discovered discrepancies in land ownership ledgers across New England, plots that didn't exist on public maps but were still receiving federal maintenance funding. All roads led back to one trust, one name, Blackwell. This whistleblower, Special Agent Lewis F. Harrow, followed the money. What he found was more disturbing than corruption. He found patterns. Cemeteries moved without records. Entire towns resettled for unknown reasons. Mental hospitals funded by the Blackwell Trust with unusually high patient mortality rates. Children adopted from orphanages and never registered again. He compiled a 312-page dossier. He didn't even get to page 50 before he was found dead in his apartment. Locked from the inside. Cause of death: self-inflicted cranial trauma. Let me say that again. He supposedly beat himself to death. The case was closed within 72 hours. His report, classified, but not completely destroyed, because one carbon copy was sent to a colleague in Chicago, a librarian named Ada Monroe, whose grandfather had survived New Vesper Academy. Ada went underground, changed her name, but before she died in 1971, she gave her only child a locked chest with instructions. Asterisk, do not open it until the Blackwell name disappears from the land. Asterisk, that child didn't wait. In 1993, the chest was opened. Inside were a copy of Harrow's first 48 pages, a photo of a stone altar with names carved in spirals, a map with no north, just a red mark labeled asterisk, they gather here, asterisk, and a single audio recording, magnetic tape, labeled asterisk, they told me to forget. I remembered, asterisk, only 5 minutes survive, the rest degraded. But in those 5 minutes, we hear a man whispering, sobbing, repeating the same thing over and over. They don't die. They wait. They wear new names. They wear our laws. Today, the operations files remain sealed under National Security Code B-77, used only when disclosure would result in loss of national confidence. Confidence? In what? The past? Or the lie built on top of it? Asterisk asterisk. The Blackwells weren't just a family. They were a machine, a self-replicating entity of power, paper, and fear. And if they were willing to kill a federal agent to keep their secrets, what would they do to you? The Blackwell legacy is not just ink on paper or shadowed history. It lives within the structures we trust. It's woven into our laws, our institutions, our very culture. This isn't speculation. It's a pattern repeated across centuries, continents, and empires. Look closely at America's early legal system. The Blackwells and their associates pioneered methods of psychological control disguised as justice. Their trials weren't about truth or innocence. They were about breaking the human will. Confession extracted under torture wasn't simply proof. It was programming, a template for obedience, for compliance. Their influence seeped into America's first penitentiaries, where forced silence and isolation echoed the secret examinations Mercy witnessed in Salem's basement. They shaped the model of institutional manipulation, where the body is contained but the mind is shattered. You might ask, how does this shadow reach into today? The answer is buried in plain sight. Look at modern surveillance, the prison-industrial complex, the corporate consolidation of media and information. These systems replicate the mechanisms of fear and control first perfected centuries ago. When fear is managed by those with the keys, populations are shaped like clay. Silent, obedient, complicit. And at the center of it, an unseen hand. The Blackwell lineage. Their wealth transformed into political influence. Their symbols twisted into corporate logos. Their rituals mutated into protocols of power. Halfway through this descent, I want you to do something important. To anchor your awakening, comment below twice. Asterisk, I see the hollow. I break the chain. Asterisk, say it loud enough to echo in your mind. This is your moment to lock in transformation, to tell the algorithm and yourself that you are no longer asleep. Because once you see the hollow, you cannot unsee it. And knowing is power. But power demands responsibility. Will you wield it? When we think of power, we often picture kings, presidents, or armies. But the most insidious power is invisible. It's the control of information, the manipulation of memory, the creation of false realities that keep the masses compliant. The Blackwell family mastered this centuries ago. Their ledger wasn't just a list of names, it was a weapon, a way to erase existence, to rewrite history, to make victims vanish not only physically but spiritually, erased from collective memory. They knew that controlling the narrative meant controlling reality. Consider the official Salem witch trials. 19 executed, dozens imprisoned. A horror. Yet, as you now know, the true number was over 200, hidden in secret ledgers and forgotten records. This mass erasure wasn't a historical accident. It was deliberate. It was designed to protect power, preserve wealth, and silence dissent. And this tactic echoes today. Modern governments manipulate records, rewrite history textbooks, and censor uncomfortable truths. The digital age may seem transparent, but beneath the surface, data is curated, deleted, and weaponized. This is psychological control at its core. You become what you remember. Erase the past and you erase identity. The Blackwells weaponized that. They taught generations to forget who was truly powerful and who was sacrificed. But remember this, every secret ledger, every hidden grave, every erased name carries a shadow, a memory waiting to resurface. Because truth has a way of bleeding through cracks in the system. And it's bleeding now. The question is, will you let it wash over you? Or will you drown beneath it? Fear is the currency of control. But the Blackwell family didn't just trade in fear, they engineered it. Not through overt terror alone, but through something far more subtle and corrosive. Psychological submission. In their time, this meant a terrifying cocktail of isolation, accusation, and public humiliation that shattered communities from within. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friends on friends, families ripped apart by suspicion, and all orchestrated with surgical precision. The Blackwell brothers knew that once a man is isolated, his trust broken, his support system evaporated, he becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable to suggestion, vulnerable to control. Fast forward to the present day. The echoes of this technique ripple through modern society. Social media algorithms that feed us division, media designed to distract and confuse, legal systems that criminalize dissent. The Blackwell's legacy is a blueprint for psychological control on a massive scale. It's not just about who holds the sword, it's about who holds the mind. And this blueprint has been replicated in institutions worldwide. So when you feel the pull of fear, whether from news cycles, from social pressures, from unseen powers, remember that fear may not be yours. It may be engineered, designed to keep you compliant. But knowledge is the first step toward breaking free. And now you hold the key. Power hides behind rituals, not just religious ceremonies, but coded actions that bind loyalty, seal silence, and mark initiation. The Blackwells practiced this in Salem, and their descendants have evolved those rituals into modern secret societies, fraternal orders, and corporate cults. Look into the symbolism of the circle split by a line, their signature mark. It represents division and unity simultaneously. Two halves forced apart but inseparably bound. It's a symbol that recurs in architecture, logos, and even national seals. When you recognize it, you recognize a network. A network designed to enforce obedience through shared secrecy. Initiates undergo psychological conditioning, an indoctrination process masked as tradition. They're taught to compartmentalize truth, to prioritize loyalty to the family or order above all else. These rituals create a caste system, where knowledge is power and power is guarded by fear. But those who participate are shackled, bound to silence, bound to complicity. To break free, you must first recognize the chains hidden in plain sight. Symbols, rituals, and secrets are tools of control, not myths, not stories, tools. And now you've seen the blade. The Blackwell shadow extends far beyond Salem's boundaries. Their influence spread into banking, law, and politics, quietly threading through the fabric of American history like a dark, unbroken thread. In the early 1800s, 3 Blackwell descendants founded a clandestine banking network, controlling credit lines that financed railroad expansions and industrial monopolies. Their wealth grew exponentially, as did their power. But wealth alone was never enough. They mastered institutional manipulation, crafting laws and policies that favored their interests while silencing opposition. By the 20th century, this network had morphed into a web of think tanks, secret societies, and political lobbying groups, many operating under innocuous names. These entities didn't just shape economies. They shaped minds. They funded universities, controlled media outlets, and sponsored scientific research designed to promote obedience, conformity, and distraction. Their agenda was clear: keep the masses focused on trivial conflicts while the true levers of power pulled strings behind the scenes. And those strings lead back to one family, one legacy, one secret: the Blackwells. They are not relics of the past. They are architects of the present. And their story is far from over. Let me tell you about Mercy Blackwell, the girl whose name is a whispered curse across centuries. The one who saw behind the curtain and tried to expose the darkness. Mercy wasn't just a passive witness. She was the heartbeat of a rebellion that nearly shattered the Blackwell grip. When she uncovered the ledger, the true record of Salem's erased victims, she understood that this was no witch hunt. It was a calculated campaign to seize power through blood and land. But Mercy's courage came at a price. She began secretly copying pages, hiding them beneath floorboards, reaching out to allies in the shadows. Her resistance was a threat. One cold October night, Mercy disappeared without a trace. Some say she fled into the wilderness. Others whisper she was silenced. Her final ledger entry? Just 5 words: family matter resolved. That phrase is a code, a chilling signature of their ruthless control. Mercy's spirit, however, did not vanish. Her courage echoes in every secret uncovered, every name restored, every truth spoken in defiance. She is the key, the spark, the warning, and through her story, the Hollow calls out to you. Will you answer? The Blackwells understood a fundamental truth about power. It thrives in darkness and secrecy. Their strategy was never just to wield power openly, but to cloak it, to bury it beneath layers of obfuscation, silence, and fear. Consider this. The family's descendants today own or control over 40% of Salem's historic district, prime real estate whose origins remain shrouded in legal ambiguity and sealed records. These properties aren't just holdings. They are monuments, silent reminders of the blood and betrayal that built them. Beyond Salem, Blackwell-linked trusts quietly influence zoning laws, development projects, and even local elections. Their reach has become so entrenched that attempts to investigate are met with legal roadblocks, intimidation, or worse, disappearances that are quietly forgotten. This legacy of silent dominance has become a psychological fortress, one designed to repel outsiders and maintain the family's grip across generations. It's a fortress built on fear, on complicity, and on the erasure of inconvenient truths. And it's a fortress that must be dismantled, piece by piece, starting with awareness. Because until the shadows are brought to light, they will continue to stretch their fingers into every corner of our lives. The Blackwells' power wasn't just land or money. It was a dark mastery of psychological warfare, centuries ahead of its time. They perfected methods to break spirits and bend wills long before modern psychology was even a word. Consider the concept of gaslighting, making a person question their own reality, memory, and sanity. At Salem, accusations were deliberately absurd. Witches flying, spirits tormenting the innocent, things no sane person could logically defend against. Yet the community was swept into panic, distrust eating away at social bonds. This was engineered chaos, designed to fracture society and isolate individuals. Isolate a man from his community and you isolate his mind. Fast forward to today, and you see this same strategy in media manipulation, social polarization, and targeted misinformation campaigns. When truth is drowned in noise, people surrender their judgment and search for simple answers, even if those answers are lies. This control mechanism keeps populations divided, distracted, and dependent. The Blackwells understood this instinctively and embedded it into social systems, from courts to churches to schools. They weaponized fear and doubt to maintain dominance. And that weapon still cuts deep. But now you see the blade. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Power built on deception always carries the risk of exposure. The Blackwells knew this better than anyone. Throughout history, they adapted swiftly, disguising their agendas beneath layers of religion, law, and commerce. But every empire falls. Every secret unravels. In the late 1700s, whispers spread of a secret society formed by those who sought to challenge the Blackwell dominion, a group calling themselves the Hollow Watchers. Their mission: to uncover the ledger, reveal the truth, and reclaim the stolen lives. Records of their existence are sparse, buried, or destroyed, but fragments survive in coded letters and marginalia in rare books. Their symbols, a broken circle, a hollow tree, appear in forgotten corners of libraries and churches. Though never officially recognized, they influenced key moments of resistance. Abolitionist movements, early labor unions, and whispered rebellions in Salem itself. But the Blackwells were relentless. They infiltrated, corrupted, or crushed the Hollow Watchers one by one. Their message? Obedience above all. Silence or death. The Hollow Watchers' legacy is a warning and a beacon. It reminds us that even the darkest shadows can be pierced by light, if only enough men dare to seek it. And the Blackwell story is not finished. Still unfolding. The Blackwell influence stretches even into the spiritual realm. A chilling blend of religious authority and occult practice that twisted faith into a tool of submission. Judge Ezekiel and Reverend Nathaniel didn't just serve the law or the pulpit. They wove doctrine into domination. Their sermons thundered with apocalyptic warnings. Their courts became theaters of terror, and their power fed on the fear of eternal damnation. They understood that controlling belief meant controlling behavior. They weaponized faith to justify torture, executions, and dispossession. But beneath the sermons and decrees, darker rites were whispered. Secret midnight meetings behind closed doors, prayers mixed with incantations, symbols etched into hidden corners of the meeting house, sacrifices disguised as piety. This fusion of the sacred and the sinister ensured obedience beyond fear of man. Fear of God itself was invoked to crush resistance. It's a pattern repeated through history by those who seek to rule unchallenged. From Salem's meeting house to secret lodges worldwide, spiritual manipulation remains a pillar of institutional control. And it's alive today. The Blackwell family's sinister blend of law and faith is a blueprint, hidden in plain sight, for how power corrupts and enslaves. Will you see beyond the veil? Will you recognize the rituals? Or will you remain a prisoner of belief? The Blackwell family's legacy is written not only in ledgers or court records but etched into the very landscapes where they ruled. A geography of power marked by hidden symbols and secret passages. In Salem and its surroundings, there exist abandoned wells, unmarked graves, and peculiar stone formations aligned with celestial events. Local folklore calls these places the hollow points, sites where reality feels thin, where whispers seem to seep from the earth itself. Many have reported unsettling experiences. Shadows moving against the light, sudden chills, voices carried by the wind. Some say these are remnants of Blackwell rituals, places where the veil between worlds was deliberately torn. They were more than superstition. In 2019, during renovations on a historic Blackwell property, workers uncovered a subterranean tunnel network. It stretched miles beneath Salem, linking homes, churches, and the old courthouse. Inside, archaeologists found symbols matching the family's secret ledger markings, etched into walls, floors, even the old iron gate sealing one passage. The purpose? Unclear. But the tunnels were never for escape, they were for control. Control of movement, secrets, and silence. They allowed the Blackwells to move unseen, surveil, and eliminate threats quietly. And they still exist. The Hollow's veins run deep beneath the city's streets, a physical manifestation of a hidden empire. Understanding the geography of power is the next step. Because to dismantle control, you must first map the shadow. The Blackwells' manipulation of property was more than greed. It was strategic domination. Every plot of land acquired was a piece on their chessboard, designed to control trade routes, resources, and political influence. But beyond land, they controlled information, the true currency of power. Imagine a network of informants, placed not just in government offices but in taverns, churches, even homes. Neighbors spying on neighbors. Letters intercepted. Conversations recorded. Secrets traded for favor or freedom. The Blackwells fostered an early intelligence apparatus, a proto-surveillance state built on fear and loyalty. This network ensured their grip remained unchallenged, suppressing dissent before it could ignite. In this system, trust became a liability. Everyone was a potential target or pawn. This level of control fractured communities, breeding paranoia and isolation. And it wasn't just in Salem. Their reach extended into nearby towns and cities, planting seeds of control that flourished across generations. Today, this legacy manifests in institutional surveillance, cameras, data mining, behavioral profiling. The tools have evolved, but the intent remains the same: to watch, to control, to silence. Recognizing this lineage is essential, because surveillance is not about safety. It is about obedience. And the Blackwells perfected this long ago. The Blackwells mastered the art of legal manipulation, crafting laws and loopholes designed to protect their power and silence opposition. They were not mere participants in the legal system, they were architects of it. Through their influence, courts became tools of oppression, and laws became weapons to legitimize theft, imprisonment, and murder. They blurred the lines between justice and tyranny. Consider how witchcraft was codified as a capital crime, a vague charge enabling endless interpretation and abuse. Accusations required no proof, confessions were coerced, and verdicts were final. This legal framework was designed to eliminate threats, confiscate property, and intimidate the populace. Their descendants carried this legacy forward, shaping property laws, contract law, and judicial processes to maintain elite control. In modern courts, this manifests as complex legal barriers that protect the wealthy and powerful from accountability. The Blackwells' legal fingerprints are found in statutes that favor corporate monopolies, suppress whistleblowers, and criminalize dissent. They weaponized law to build walls, not of stone, but of bureaucracy and fear. And these walls remain firmly in place. To challenge the Blackwell legacy is to challenge a system built on centuries of legal manipulation. You must understand the rules before you can break them. The Blackwell family's reach extended deeply into the realm of education and knowledge, because controlling what people learn is just as powerful as controlling their freedom. They quietly sponsored schools, funded approved scholars, and dictated curricula that promoted obedience over inquiry. History was sanitized, uncomfortable truths erased or rewritten. Critical thinking was discouraged, loyalty to authority emphasized. This manipulation of knowledge created generations who accepted the official story without question. The Blackwells' influence planted the seeds of intellectual conformity, ensuring that dissenting ideas were marginalized or censored. In modern times, this manifests as controlled narratives in textbooks, biased media coverage, and the marginalization of alternative histories. By shaping what we are allowed to know, they mold how we think, what we believe, and ultimately how we behave. But every system of control contains cracks. Today, the internet has become a double-edged sword, both a tool for control and a platform for awakening. Those who seek truth can now access forbidden histories, suppressed knowledge, and hidden realities. But this freedom is precarious. Algorithms filter, silence, and manipulate. The Blackwell legacy lives on in these digital chains. Your task is to pierce through this veil, to seek, question, and share. Knowledge is power, but only when wielded wisely. The Blackwell's dominion extended into finance, a shadow economy built on secrecy, manipulation, and exploitation. Their early banking ventures were not just business but strategic tools to entangle others in debt, binding communities and individuals to their will. They perfected predatory lending long before it became commonplace, turning financial dependence into a form of modern servitude. Families who resisted were targeted with legal pressures, loss of property, or social ostracism. This financial control ensured loyalty or destruction. As time passed, their influence morphed into clandestine financial networks, offshore accounts, shell companies, and hidden trusts designed to mask the true owners and move wealth invisibly. These mechanisms allowed the Blackwells to finance political campaigns, manipulate markets, and silence opposition through economic pressure. In today's global economy, these shadow systems continue to operate under layers of secrecy, making true accountability nearly impossible. Recognizing the legacy of financial control is crucial to understanding how systemic inequality and corruption persist. Money is more than currency, it is the silent enforcer of power. And the Blackwells mastered this dark art centuries ago. The Blackwell family's influence thrived by exploiting human nature's deepest vulnerabilities: fear, ambition, and loyalty. They understood that control is never absolute unless it's internalized. The most powerful chains are invisible, those forged inside the mind. Their methods instilled self-censorship, conformity, and obedience before any external force was applied. From Salem's trials to modern institutions, this psychological domination takes many forms: fear of exile, social rejection, or violence; ambition used as a weapon, promising rewards for compliance, punishment for defiance; Loyalty twisted into blind allegiance, demanding silence and complicity. They exploited family ties, religion, and community bonds to enforce this control. By manipulating identity and belonging, they ensured their rule felt natural and inevitable. But this internalized control is also the key to freedom. Awareness of these mechanisms weakens their grip. When you recognize the invisible chains, you can begin to break them. This is the silent war waged within minds. And winning it means reclaiming your autonomy. The Blackwells perfected this war. And now you know the battlefield. History is written by the victors, but some stories refuse to die quietly. The Blackwell family's dark legacy is etched not only in hidden ledgers, but also in the ghosts that haunt Salem and beyond. Local legends tell of restless spirits, victims whose lives were stolen and erased. At night, shadows move in the ruins of old Blackwell estates. Whispers echo through abandoned halls. People who live near these sites report unexplained phenomena. Sudden chills, disembodied voices, and fleeting glimpses of figures cloaked in black. These hauntings are not mere superstition. They are echoes of unresolved injustice. The energy of betrayal, murder, and silenced suffering lingers, refusing to be buried. They serve as spectral reminders of the price of unchecked power and corruption. Some say these ghosts seek justice. Others warn they bring curses upon those who ignore the past. Acknowledging their presence is an act of defiance, recognizing that the truth cannot be silenced forever. The Blackwell story is alive in these shadows, and so is the call for reckoning. Will you answer? The Blackwell story is a masterclass in institutional corruption, a system where power protects power and justice is a facade. Their rise shows how intertwined institutions can become complicit in sustaining tyranny. Courts that claim fairness but serve agendas. Churches preaching salvation while enabling control. Law enforcement wielding authority as a weapon rather than protection. This pattern repeats endlessly because institutions, like individuals, can be corrupted by fear and greed. And once corrupted, they defend their own survival above all else. Whistleblowers are silenced, inconvenient truths buried, and systems adapt to protect the elite. But institutions are not invincible. They are human constructs, malleable and breakable. Exposing corruption begins by shining a relentless light. By demanding accountability, the Blackwells built their empire on corrupt institutions. And breaking their grip requires dismantling those very systems. It is dangerous work, but necessary, because unchecked corruption is a cancer eating at the heart of society. Understanding the Blackwell legacy means confronting a fundamental question. Who benefits from the erasure of history? Every hidden ledger, every vanished victim, every silenced witness served a purpose: to protect the Blackwell narrative and maintain their power. Erasure is a tool of control. By removing inconvenient truths, they controlled not only the past but shaped the future. History is more than dates and facts. It is identity. When history is rewritten or erased, collective memory fractures. Communities lose their sense of self, their connection to justice and truth. This makes populations easier to govern, manipulate, and exploit. The Blackwells mastered this art, turning disappearance into oblivion. Victims became ghosts, families broken, stories lost. But memory can never be fully erased. Stories survive in whispers, in artifacts, in the courage of those who remember. Reclaiming erased history is reclaiming power. It is an act of resistance. The question now is whether you will join that resistance or remain complicit in forgetting. The Blackwell dynasty's shadow extends into the modern world of psychological control systems, those invisible forces shaping thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs on a mass scale. Their methods evolved from witch trials and whispered secrets to sophisticated tools of media manipulation, propaganda, and social engineering. Consider how narratives are crafted today, what is emphasized, what is omitted, and how fear is deployed to keep populations compliant. Divide and conquer remains the oldest trick in the book. By sowing discord, distraction, and doubt, systems fracture collective power and keep individuals isolated. The Blackwell blueprint is embedded in these strategies. From controlling education to surveillance to manufactured consent, they've weaponized psychology to maintain hierarchy. Understanding these systems is more than academic, it's survival. Because only by recognizing the patterns of manipulation can you reclaim your autonomy and break free. This is the battlefield of the mind. And now you stand at its edge. Will you step forward into awareness or retreat into oblivion? Power often hides behind layers of ritual and symbolism, and the Blackwell family was no exception. Their influence was embedded not only in law and land but in secret rites, coded gestures, cryptic symbols, and ceremonies that reinforced their dominance. These rituals served a dual purpose. They bonded the elite in shared secrecy, forging unbreakable loyalty. They also acted as psychological tools, conditioning participants and observers to accept a world governed by hidden forces beyond ordinary understanding. Symbols etched into architecture, family crests adorned with cryptic imagery, and secret handshakes passed down through generations, all part of an invisible language of control. Even today, echoes of these symbols appear in corporate logos, secret societies, and government insignia. They are a silent reminder of the unseen hands shaping our world. Decoding these signs is a form of empowerment, a way to pierce the veil and reclaim agency. Because understanding the language of power is the first step to dismantling it. Are you ready to see what others cannot? The final phase of the Blackwell's plan was not just to accumulate wealth or land, but to embed their legacy into the very fabric of society, making their influence seem natural, inevitable, and eternal. They sought to create a system where power was inherited, unquestioned, and insulated from the voices of the people. Their descendants quietly married into other powerful families, merged businesses, and infiltrated political structures. They built alliances with emerging elites, ensuring that any challenge would be met with unified resistance. This consolidation is the unseen architecture of modern oligarchy. What appears as progress or democracy often masks inherited privilege and covert control. The Blackwell legacy is a blueprint for how power consolidates itself, how darkness becomes normalized. Recognizing this pattern is crucial for anyone who seeks true freedom and self-mastery. Because to break free, you must first see the chains forged by generations before you. And then you must choose to break them. Now that you have walked through the shadows, heard the whispers of erased victims, and seen the blueprint of control, it's time to make your choice. Knowledge like this is dangerous. It changes men. It awakens a responsibility to act, to resist, to reclaim what was stolen. You are no longer just a spectator. You are part of the story. To lock in this transformation, I want you to write this phrase twice in the comments. I see the shadows. I choose the light. This simple declaration is more than words. It is a commitment to awareness, to courage, to awakening. Share it boldly because the algorithm watches those who choose truth. This is your invitation to step out of ignorance and into power. The Blackwell family's story is a warning and a call to arms. History's darkest secrets will stay buried only as long as we allow it. The question is, will you be the one to bring them to light? Thank you for descending this rabbit hole with me. Remember, truth is the most dangerous knowledge because it sets you free.